OSU English's 7 Questions with Ruth Friedman.
So if I had to choose one book for all English majors to read, I would choose Anthony Trollope's The Eustace Diamonds. It is a ginormously thick book, and it is a soap opera about the upper class in 19th century England and their love affairs and governesses and dukes and duchesses, and it is fabulous. I guess I have to overcome my desire to follow the student around and make sure that they do everything that I want them to do and that they're okay and that they're taken care of and that this office over here is going to be nice to them and help them too. So for me that's the challenge. The challenge is remembering that you all are grown-ups and that you've come for advice and that, we can give advice, but we can't follow you around and help you at every point. And the other challenge is oftentimes there are students who they're in my office, and so I know that they have come here because they do have questions and they do want to know something, but sometimes I find it hard to figure out what that is, right? So I can talk a blue streak and give you all kinds of information, but sometimes it's a little bit hard to read a student. There's often, I've always joked about this, that if you're an instructor and you teach college students, you look out into this classroom and there's this whole sea of faces, and really those faces look the same way whether you're being entertaining or boring or interesting or not interesting, right? And sometimes I feel like that's the same for advising, right? The student is sitting across from you and you're just not sure if what you're saying is getting through to them or if what you're saying is helpful or not. So then you just keep talking and you hope at some point that the light bulb will go on for you or the student, right? Mm-hmm. So my path to advising was very weird and circuitous. When I was in college, I always wanted to be an English professor. And I always thought that, well, first of all, I love to read, and I really did enjoy writing and analyzing texts, and I really also liked this idea of strolling into a college classroom, wearing a scarf and talking about Milton and Dickens and, Shakespeare, and that this would just be very fulfilling and glamorous, right? And then I got accepted into Northwestern's PhD program in English, and I went to that. And the first couple of years were good, you finish your graduate coursework in English, and then I did my exams, and all along the way I was a teaching assistant, right? So on Fridays I would lead those 2 discussion sections, and that was really fun. I loved that part of the whole graduate school experience. But then when I was in my 4th year, I had to start writing my dissertation. So that's the moment where, your dissertation committee, the 3 people say to you, okay, we think you're ready to go off and do this big project. Let us know if you need help. So what that really means for those of us who are PhD students, you are supposed to spend lots of time by yourself reading things and synthesizing ideas and coming up with your own interpretations and then writing all that down. Right? Well, this was absolute hell to me. I would sit in our apartment, because at this point I had married my husband, and I would it was everything I could do just to sit still and write a sentence. It was just so lonely. I would much rather be talking to people. And so at that moment, after spending 6 or 7 months in this period, right, writing and reading, and I read everything, I decided that I needed to leave the PhD program, that it was just too lonely and I didn't want to spend the rest of my life trying to figure out how to sit down and research and write books. And it was particularly interesting because my husband, who teaches in the department, does have his PhD, is a professor of English, and actually loves sitting around reading and writing by himself all day. So it was good to have a model of someone who does that really well and finds that really energizing, as opposed to me who did not find that energizing. So I left the PhD program because I got a job running gifted and talented programs for high school students, so like summer programs, where you could finish like your geography credit or whatever for high school. And that was really fun. So I did that for about 6 months. And then my husband was offered a 1-year visiting assistantship in the Houston area. So we moved to Houston for the year. And I'm from Texas. And this was a little bit stressful for me. I mean, Texas was the one place I thought I would never live again. So it was interesting that we were going back to Texas. But we lived in Houston that year, and my husband was teaching at Rice, and it was really cool because my sister was like a senior at Rice, so we got to spend a lot of time with her and hang out and get to know the city. And of course, like Houston is built on a swamp, so it was like excruciatingly hot. But also you could be outdoors all the time as opposed to here. So when we moved to Houston, I needed to find a job, and I took a position as a grants writer for the Museum of Fine Arts Houston. And grants writing was, I mean, it was really interesting. I learned a lot about different art. I learned a lot about how museums engage with education and like curriculum for elementary, middle, and high school students. But the problem was that when you're a grants writer, you also spend all day alone by yourself reading and writing. So it was not a good choice on my part. I had actually been offered another job that I probably should have taken as a development assistant for the symphony, and then I think I would have been able to like talk more, right? So then we moved to Columbus after about a year, and when we moved here, of course, I had to get a job again. And I actually got a job running the editorial office for an academic journal over in the College of Ed. So I set up the office, I like emailed with all the authors, I helped run the submissions, system, and then I copy edited the manuscripts. And so it was really interesting. I like learned a whole new business, just like I had learned the art, grant writing business. But again, the problem was that it was quite lonely. I mean, I would see the editors once a week for meetings, but other than that, I was all by email. So eventually, I applied for a job as a assistant director for outreach with the Women in Engineering program at Ohio State. I have no background in engineering, and I was really nervous, as I'm sure they were, about hiring me. But I got hired for the job, and it was really cool. Like, I did presentations to groups ranging in age from like kindergarten all the way up through like pre-college students, like in high school. So I would do presentations about engineering and engineering careers, and particularly designed to get women interested in engineering. And then I ran like the residential summer camps and the 1 day a year weekend programs and all that kind of stuff. So it was really fun, and I've learned all kinds of fascinating things, like that Olympic swimmers' swimsuits are welded together, like using ultrasonic waves. Yes. So the shape of their body actually changes because their suit is not sewn. There are no seams. It is welded. So this is fascinating. So I learned all kinds of random stuff like this, which I find fascinating, right? I don't want to be an engineer, and I don't want to like learn it all in that great detail, but the way it impacts our lives is fascinating. So that was really fun, and I also spent a lot of time in that role working with engineering undergraduates, because for the big programs that we would do, it always required the women engineering students as volunteers, right? So I spent a lot of time at that point like talking to college age students, and I really liked that. And then I had a bit of a crisis after about 2 years of doing that, and I was like, well, I like this job a lot, but like, am I gonna do this forever, right? And I was like, well, I don't know. And I'd always wondered if I wanted to be do an early childhood degree, right? So I actually spent 6 months teaching preschool at the Jewish Community Center here in Columbus, and it was amazing. The people there are amazing, and I learned a ton, again, about a whole different field that I didn't know about. And it was great. Like the kids, I was in like a 2 to 3 year old class, like they all turned 3 the year that I was, during the school year. And everything that a 2 to 3 year old are struggling to learn, we are all still struggling to learn, right? They need to learn not to hit people, not to get mad at people, to like get mad, but to use their words and control their temper, right? They need to learn to, participate in a group setting and to like, make sure that they're able to have what they want, but not at the expense of someone else. And so this was totally fascinating to me that no matter how old we get, we all are actually still struggling with the same things. We want to be loved and we want to be hugged and we want to have little adventures and we want to like do all these things. I mean, it was really, really good and great, and I love those kids. But around December of that year, my husband mentioned to me that the position had opened up here in the English department, and I was like, that's what I want. I was like, I love young people of all ages, but if I were to go to the English department as an advisor, I would get to not only love young people and talk to them and engage with them, but it would be in a field that I really believe in and feel passionate about, right? So that's how I ended up here.
Awesome.
And yeah, so it's lots of fun.
Cool.
I think I'm still finding out what my dream job is, right? Every job I've had has gotten me a little closer, right, to my dream job. But I really think that my dream job would be to, and I can't figure out how this would work, but basically like delivering public presentations to people on I don't know what, day in and day out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just so maybe that is teaching in a sense, like middle or high school teaching, but maybe it's not, right?
Yeah.
Because I like the one-on-one stuff as well as the group settings. But really, I just like to talk all day.
Yeah.
I mean, Oh, I would totally rather read 500 pages. Writing, I'm a good writer, but the writing process is excruciating. I would, you'd like write 3 sentences and then you're going to go eat like chocolate and write 3 sentences and eat some more chocolate, right? Like you're not, but the reading 500 pages. So I was a Victorianist in grad school. So, I mean, I can sit still for like 6 hours straight just reading. And my husband and I always tease my husband because he is like an American lit person.
Okay.
In American literature, the books are usually shorter than like in 19th century Britain, Victorian literature. So like he always was like, why are you such a fast reader? And like, why are, these books are so thick? And I would be like, well, I mean, if you have to get through like 800 pages, you're going to learn to read really fast, right? And really like concentrate.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know, can you even say that without insulting the people that are there? Yeah, well, whatever. I'm not going to answer this question. I'm going to do my own thing. So I know that, okay, so if I could live at least right now, based on what I know of the world, which is very little, right? But I've traveled like in Spain and around the U.S. and stuff. But my husband and I went to Toronto for a week or so last summer. And if I could live anywhere, I would live in Toronto. Like, it was so exciting. There are like old-fashioned trolleys going everywhere. You can go to the beach, but then there's also the city. And then like, I don't know, it just seemed great. And Canada just seemed like a pleasant place to be. Although the current mayor of Toronto is the one who's had some problems.
Ooh.
He's the one that's gotten himself into some situations. But the city was lovely.
Yeah.
And then plus, I also have always wanted to live in Canada. So did you ever read Anne of Green Gables?
Oh,
Like
I think I started that and never finished it when I was little.
So there's like 29 million books in this Anne of Green Gables series, and Lucy Maud Montgomery, the author, she had the characters like they lived on Prince Edward Island. I've always wanted to live on Prince Edward Island. I'm sure there's not very much there. No, nothing offensive to the people that live there, but I have this fantasy that like all things would be great if we only lived on Prince Edward Island. It's interesting because when I first came to Ohio State, I remember I would talk to the women students in the engineering college because I really didn't believe that you all felt comfortable here. And because I went to a very small college, there were only a couple thousand, right? So you knew everyone almost in your graduating class, at least by sight. And I couldn't imagine that undergraduates at Ohio State would have a kind of intimate community and experience. And so I remember like sort of asking engineering students, are you sure that you're okay? Like, are you sure that you have, it feels communal enough? And they would be like, oh my God, I see the same like 20 people day in and day out. They were like, between my classes and like wherever I live and like the little student, whatever student org I've gotten involved in, like it's actually a very small world. It's just there's many, many, many communities in this small world, right? So I guess for me, like I have come to see that as the greatest strength, like this idea that Ohio State is something very different for different groups of people, right? So the engineering students may have never thought about the fact that like the English department has its own undergraduate culture, right? Or that if you're part of the band, you have your whole other community, right? Or if you do like improv comedy with Fishbowl, like you've got your own little set of communities. And that to me is kind of amazing. Like it's amazing that your college experience actually reflects the experience that you're going to have living in the world, which is that you will be part of small communities and there will be many communities around you and you might pay attention to some of them at certain points, but you just understand that like everybody's part of something, but you don't have to feel like you know everyone or that you're part of everything. Does that, like you get
definitely.
to pick where you want to be. And I think that's good.
I like that, yeah.
I mean, I think that's what grown-up life is like, really.
Yeah.